Welcome to my channel where a gift from a stranger will bring ruin to many. Today we are telling scary stories. And let's start with the housewarming gift. It was spring when my cousin, Donnie, moved out of his parents' home and into his first place. He was all grown up and off to college in Tennessee. He started looking around the property, which is when he found a large shed in the backyard. Donnie figured he would use the shed for storage. He cleaned it out and began bringing boxes of stuff out to the shed. He thought it was weird that this woman paid him for stuff that was just sitting in a shed going to waste. But maybe she just really wanted the plates. Donnie went back to his room and shut the door. He didn't hear anything else that day. An hour later, he heard a knock at the door. He opened it and saw a woman standing there. She was the same woman who took the plates, Jennifer. He considered running, but he was scared she might be dangerous. Donnie stepped aside and revealed the box. He told her that she could look through it to prove that it was hers, but he didn't think she would find anything. Jennifer snatched the box from his hands and flung it open. But instead of looking inside, she reached inside and grabbed Donnie's arm. She dragged him toward the door. He sat Donnie down in a chair and told him that he would go check on something. Could ghosts wear rings? Had Jennifer been trying to reclaim her ring? Or was she trying to warn him to stay away? He packed up his things and drove away from Apple Grove. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And if you have, please do it again. If you can't do that, then just remember to hit the like button. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into our next story. Every time he passes by Apple Grove, he wonders if Jennifer still lives in his old house and what happened to her all those years ago. Donnie didn't know. Billy Bob leaned close to Donnie and whispered, "You should leave this town, son. We don't know what Jennifer's like these days. She hasn't been seen in years, but now she's back, and who knows what she'll do. Stay away from her and get out of this town." A few minutes later, the man returned with a familiar silver ring in his hand. Donnie gasped. Is that the ring?" the man asked. Donnie nodded. "Then this is yours," the man said. He stood and held out his hand. "My name is Billy Bob, by the way. Let me guess. You found this ring in a box on your porch with a note attached to it?" "Yes, how did you know?" "Everyone in this town knows about that box. That ring was my sister's. Her name was Jennifer.
Oh.
She died 3 years ago. But sometimes people see her walking around town. They call her the Ghost Bride. Not many people know where she lives, but apparently you found her house." She introduced herself again and asked if she could come in. Donnie was taken aback by her sudden entrance. Donnie screamed as he tried to pull away from her. Jennifer continued to drag him toward the door. She pulled him outside, then down the driveway. Donnie wanted to run, but he couldn't pull away from her. Jennifer suddenly stopped and turned to Donnie. She let go of his arm and shoved him roughly. "There," she said, pointing to a house down the road. "Go there. Someone will help you." With that, Jennifer disappeared into the bushes. He stammered and tried to say no, but Jennifer interrupted him and said that she already knew he had something that belonged to her, and she was here to get it back. As he approached, he saw a light turn on inside. The front door opened and a man stood there. He was tall and thin with greasy hair and a patchy beard. "Can I help you?" the man asked. He even found an old rusty tractor in there, and he spent some time restoring it. The man stared at Donnie for a moment without saying a word. Finally, Donnie asked, "Do you know who sent me here?" The man shook his head. "If you want help, you need to tell me what's going on. Why did she send you here?" Donnie hesitated, but he had no choice but to tell the man about the package and the ring. He explained that he found both on his porch. He also told him about the shed and how he put an ad in the local newspaper. She pushed past Donnie and walked into the living room. She began looking around until she spotted the box with the ring. Donnie grabbed the box and stepped in front of her. He told her that he didn't know what she was talking about, and that he didn't have anything that belonged to her. Jennifer's face changed. Her eyes became cold and emotionless. She stared directly at Donnie for a moment before speaking. She said that she knew that he had something that belonged to her and she wanted it back. It was a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. There was no address or label on it. There was also no indication that a delivery truck or person had come up to the house. Donnie looked around to see if there were any other packages, but there weren't. He walked over to the box and picked it up. It was heavy. Donnie carried it over to the table beside him and set it down. Then he removed the wrapping paper. Inside was another box. It was a jewelry box. Donnie opened it and saw a ring inside. It was an antique silver ring. The center stone was a deep red color. Donnie had no idea who sent him the ring, but it was probably the woman who took the dishes. But what Donnie didn't find was anything useful to help him move boxes. So he went to the local classified section and placed an ad. He asked if anyone wanted to come over and take whatever they wanted from the shed. It was free. All they had to do was bring their own transportation and take whatever they wanted. Don Man moved into a small town called Apple Grove, which is near Nashville. He opened it and saw a woman standing there. She introduced herself as Jennifer, then asked if she could look around the shed. Donnie allowed her to enter, but he didn't go with her. He didn't care about any of the stuff in the shed. If it wasn't useful to him, then it was fine with him if someone else wanted it. After a few minutes, Jennifer knocked on the door. Again, she was holding a box filled with dishes. She thanked Donnie for letting her have them, and she offered to pay him for them. Donnie told her that it was free and that she didn't need to pay him. Jennifer insisted, though. She handed him a $20 bill. Donnie tried to tell her that it was okay, that she didn't have to pay him, but she wouldn't listen. She shoved the money in his hands and said thank you very much. She turned and walked away. It was just outside of town. It sat back off the road down a dirt driveway. It looked like your typical southern home. Old and beautiful. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of character and charm. It also came with an 1.5 acres of land, a wraparound front porch, and rocking chairs. One of the reasons he liked it so much was because of the porch. He said he could sit there for hours and rock while sipping sweet tea. Fortunately, by June, the novelty of the porch wore off, and Donnie got bored. 3 days later, Donnie heard a knock at the door, and he closed the door and looked at the $20 bill in his hand. In the morning, Donnie went out to the porch for his morning coffee. That's when he noticed a box on his welcome mat. He finished his coffee and went to the door to check for more packages, but there weren't any. Donnie shrugged and went back to his room. Donnie was confused. He asked her what she was talking about, but Jennifer didn't answer him. Donnie felt fear creep up his spine. He didn't know what this woman wanted, but he had a feeling it wasn't good. "What are you doing?" Donnie stumbled to his feet and walked toward the house. I need help," Donnie said. "This woman, she sent me here. She said you would understand." As Donnie spoke, the man listened. When Donnie was done, the man stepped aside and motioned for him to come in. Donnie nodded. He was shocked that this woman who lived in his house died 3 years ago. Donnie thanked Billy Bob for the warning, then rushed home. Now with that story in our rearview mirror, it's time to look in the one in front of us. It was well past midnight, and my phone was blowing up with orders because everyone was drunk from the bars closing earlier that night. I had completed 2 alcohol deliveries already, and I headed out to this next one. It was only about 4 miles away, so I didn't mind. I was delivering for DoorDash late one night in North Carolina. I looked over and saw a sign that read Sleepy Creek Road turns into Back Creek Road after about half a mile. It wasn't paved, and it was super dark because every single house had their lights turned off. But when I looked up, the girl was back in the window, and she was smiling. And that's when the girl popped out and shouted, "Boo," from behind the curtain. I laughed and told her to hide again. Just then, the woman came back and took the food. And during that time, I couldn't help but notice how strange everything was. It seemed wrong. How could such a nice house be in such a run-down area? And why would the lights be off in a house like this? Was she trying to rob me? There was a chandelier hanging from the ceiling and antique furniture everywhere. Walked into the kitchen to find the woman rummaging through drawers. She looked up and said, "Got it? Thanks, here you go." And to make matters worse, I kept thinking about the girl in the window. I hoped she was okay. She handed me a $100 bill. "You can keep the rest as a tip." "Thank you so much. I'll be back in 10 minutes tops." And with that, she rushed out the door. "Thanks so much," she said. "Here's your tip." She handed me a $10 bill. I blocked her number and waited for her to respond. They told me to stop by the station so I could identify the girl. When I arrived, I told them that I couldn't identify her because I didn't know who she was. One of the officers said it was pointless because the girl was obviously dead. I'm still freaked out about what I saw, especially since the footage doesn't show the whole story. What do you think happened to that girl? Let me know in the comments below. "We'll check it out," he said, "but don't expect anything." An officer walked me through the footage and I watched in horror. All I got was a reply saying, "It's fine. Keep the food. Leave the door unlocked. Also, make sure to subscribe. That's when I called the cops and told them about the house. There was no way I was staying in there by myself. I unlocked the door and ran to my car. As I jumped in, I noticed something strange. We reviewed 3 different clips, and each time she was further away from the camera than before. At first, she was standing right in front of the window. Then she was kneeling on the floor, and finally she was crawling on all 4s. The 3rd time, her face was barely visible. The entire driveway was covered in small pebbles. But when I looked back at the house, the windows were pitch black. Not a single light was on. And I said, wait, isn't this the wrong amount? You only gave me $10 when it was like $20 for the tip. It was lucky that it did because I honestly don't remember seeing her. I reached out to the customer the next day to see if everything was all right. She told me that she'd been out of town and her mother was watching the house. Apparently her mom took the order and forgot that she had a key to the front door. So when you arrived, she opened the back door and you must have scared the poor girl. She doesn't do well with strangers. I'm sorry about that, she said. Also, I paid you less than I should have. I'll Venmo you the rest of your tip. I told her it was fine. I wasn't so sure about that anymore. But when I played it back, it showed the girl clearly standing in the window. I didn't see her move at all. Then it hit me. She was sitting there the whole time, then it means she wasn't behind the curtain. She was behind the wall. I zoomed in and saw she was wearing a Victorian nightgown. But when I paused the video to take a screenshot, she was gone. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't have any more cash on me. Can I pay you back tomorrow? I can Venmo you the difference." I told her it was fine and that I'd wait until morning, before I could think of what to do. A woman opened the door. I froze and stared back at her. The girl smiled and mouthed the words, "Thank you." I was confused and didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and backed away from the door. She said, "Be there in 10. Sorry. I didn't want to go inside alone, but I needed the money. What else could I do? And asked, "What are you doing here?" I told her about the order and she apologized. "Oh, sorry, I totally forgot," she said. "Let me grab the card real quick." I drove down the road and could see nothing but trees lining both sides of the street. There were no street lights. I waited a few seconds and the woman opened the door. "I'm going to run to the store real quick. You mind letting me in while I'm gone?" I hesitated for a moment. I didn't know this woman or her intentions, but I needed the money, so I agreed. The directions took me through some random neighborhoods that I've never seen before, and suddenly my GPS says turn onto Sleepy Creek Road. After about 3 minutes, my GPS said to turn right. I looked and saw a mailbox with a number on it and what looked like an old barn. There was also a large iron fence with pointed metal spikes lining the property. I rang the doorbell and waited. I was confused why nobody answered, though, because I could see curtains moving in the living room and hear muffled voices coming from inside. I tried the doorbell again, and still nothing. I stopped, looked around, then continued down the road until I came across a clearing. And in front of me sat the most beautiful colonial-style house I'd ever seen. It looked like something out of a magazine with white pillars holding up its wide front porch. My customer's door was right in the middle. I parked in the driveway and got out with the food. As I approached the steps, I noticed how big the front yard was and how overgrown it was. As I stood there, I saw something weird. In the upstairs window across from me, I saw a girl waving slowly at me, froze and stared back at her for a second, waving as well. She turned away from the window and disappeared. I thought maybe she was playing a prank on me or something. So I put the food down on the step, snapped a pic, and sent it to the customer, saying that they forgot to unlock the door. They must have gotten my message because I heard footsteps on the stairs moments later. While she went back inside, I decided to get closer to the window to see who was in there. That's when I saw the girl come back into the window and wave at me. It was only a few seconds, but I swear it felt like forever. Before I could think of anything else, the customer texted, "Sorry, I'm running late." I stepped onto the porch and knocked on the door. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. The interior was even nicer than the exterior. Now, I was alone in this creepy house. I walked back to the door and looked outside. I drove off quickly, not looking back once. I didn't know what to think. The whole situation was weird. When I got home, I checked the dashcam footage to see if it recorded the girl. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I looked at the security footage again. And while the first clip showed the girl in a nightgown, the second one showed her sitting on the floor with a teddy bear. I sent the customer another message saying that I wanted to cancel the order because I picked up the wrong thing. They said that the house had been empty for a week. Apparently, the owner died and his daughter moved out. The girl was pale and her eyes were soulless. I tried to keep calm, but I was scared. The officers said that it was probably just a raccoon, but I knew it wasn't. I begged them to investigate, but they refused. I haven't heard from the police since, and I haven't been back to that house either. If you like this story, be sure to check out more creepy things caught on dashcam because some of them might just make you jump in your seat. It was probably just some kid's birthday party, like what my little brother had last year. It said, "What did you do yesterday?" And then it said, "Don't lie." So I told her the truth about the clown thing. She didn't respond for a while. Then she said, "Did you tell Joshua not to go?" I said he was invited by his friend Billy. This is why she begged me to make sure he didn't sneak out again, but obviously I didn't listen. I think I know why. I mean, Joshua can be such a drag sometimes. He wants to play video games all day. He never helps me clean the house. He eats everything in the pantry so fast that we never get a chance to enjoy any snacks. Figured I'd bring him back home and hide him in my closet so Mom couldn't find him. So I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The party was 2 blocks away, so I made it in less than 5 minutes. But when I got there, I couldn't believe what I saw. His hair was a mess. His eyes were black. He was wearing a dirty white shirt and he smelled like stale waste and gasoline. And then I noticed that he was holding a hammer. He smiled, and then he brought the hammer down. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe this was the wrong house. But I knew it wasn't because I'd seen the invitation. The clowns had given it to Joshua, so I walked up to the front door and knocked. No response. I knocked again, louder this time, but nothing. And then I got this sinking feeling in my stomach that I should have listened to my mom. When I found him, he wasn't at any of his usual spots. He wasn't at the skate park, wasn't at the mall. He wasn't at Billy's house, and he wasn't home. Then I could convince her that he hadn't snuck out. I could say I lied about seeing him sneak out. I mean, I was only doing it to protect him, right? I love my little brother. It's like last month we had this giant bag of flaming hot Cheetos. I was so excited. But before I could even eat one, Joshua ate the entire bag. And don't even get me started on the time he pissed out and threw his bowl of mac and cheese against the wall. There was a TV on the wall, and it was covered with what looked like dried blood. And under the TV was a small wooden table, and on it was a plate with some chips on it, and a drawing that looked like it was done by a child. It had 2 stick figures on it. One was labeled Mom and Dad, and the other was labeled me. Underneath that was written, "We love you forever." Then below that was a smiley face, except it wasn't a smiley face. It was a creepy face, with sharp teeth and horns coming out of it. It was everywhere. I still haven't cleaned it off the ceiling. But he's still 10 years old. I'm not 10 years old, and I would never throw my macaroni and cheese at the wall. Okay, maybe I would if my broccoli was floating in it. How was I supposed to know? And Mom replied, "I'm on my way over." I mean, I didn't even know he was going until he had already snuck out. I just felt bad for him because he was sitting there by himself playing video games while all of his friends were out having fun. So I thought inviting him to the party would cheer him up. But instead, he came back even more depressed. He wouldn't even look me in the eyes when he told me about the clowns. His face was totally drained of color. He looked terrible. Don't leave the house. So I just sat there waiting for her. I mean, whenever someone's being bullied at school, he's the first person to stand up and defend them. He's actually defended me from bullies a few times, which is really sweet. So when he came back from the party looking so broken, I was really scared. That's why I brought him back here. I wanted to ask him what happened. All of his friends from school showed up, and there were bouncing castles and pizza, and a guy dressed as a clown. Well, actually 2 guys dressed as clowns. I know she was just looking out for him, but she was acting like I had sent him to an active war zone. But it's not like the clowns hurt him or anything. He was just really scared. Oh, and yes, I understand that's not the point. That's not what moms are supposed to say. And yes, I know I should have known better than to argue with her, but I did anyway. I told her, "Mom, calm down. It's just a group of guys dressed as clowns. I'm sure it's fine." But she shook her head and then she took off. I could tell she was heading to Joshua's room, which meant she was going to ground him for life. I knew she was probably going to blame herself for letting him sneak out, so I wanted to stop her. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't her fault. It was mine. But by the time I got to her, She had already packed his entire closet into trash bags. And I knew no matter what I said, she wouldn't change her mind. She was crying. She sat me down and said, "Why did you let him go? Why didn't you protect him?" I was confused. I asked, "Protect him from what?" Then she said, "He's gone. Those clowns, they took him. He sneaks out so often that I've lost track. I mean, there's this one time where he pretended he was going to his friend's house, but he was actually going to the movies. He tried to cover his tracks by putting his shoes outside, pretending he was wearing them, but he forgot that he doesn't wear socks with those shoes. And when I say he was pretending to wear them, I mean he literally put socks on his hands, and then he shoved his hands into the shoes, and then he walked around like that. It's stupid things like that. It makes me feel like an asshole for thinking it's funny. And that's when I realized how serious this was. I should have protected my little brother. There was even a woman dressed as a clown. They were all really pale and sweaty, and the makeup was running down their faces. My mom was left alone to take care of both of us kids. Since then, she's pretty much spent every waking moment worrying about us. Sometimes I think she loves us more than anything in the world. Breaks my heart that she thinks I put her child in danger. But you know, it's a hot day. What can you do? And they kept doing this balloon animal thing. I guess they were trying to entertain everyone. But all of them seemed super depressed. I think it was just because they had to work on a Saturday or something. It sucks when you have to work on your birthday. Anyway, the next day I got this weird text from my mom. And after a few hours, she finally got home. When my parents had divorced years ago, my dad moved away to another city. Here's the thing. It wasn't the first time Joshua had snuck out. He does it all the time, that little shit. But look, the point is that he's constantly sneaking out, and our mom worries about him every single time. And also, it's not like I wanted to invite Joshua to the party. Dashvi, he always has this upbeat personality. But when we got home and Mom found out he'd gone to a party with a bunch of strangers, she freaked out. So that's when I decided to go find Joshua. So I went back out to find him, but he wasn't at his friend's house or anywhere else he might hang out. And then I remembered the birthday party. I wondered if he'd gone back there. So I took off running. Then I noticed the front window was slightly open. So I peeked inside and saw a rocking horse in the corner. That's when I felt a tap on my shoulder and I turned around and saw a man standing there. He was tall and skinny with long white fingers. Welcome to my channel. And this is one of the scariest places I've ever worked. I worked at a college in Pennsylvania as a security guard. At this campus, there were 3 buildings that had libraries. However, those basements were never open to the public, not even during the daytime. The basements were full of boxes and stuff. I don't know what they were storing down there. They were off limits to everyone. This door was locked too. It led to the basement. This basement, like I said before, was off limits to everyone. I sprinted out of there and I found a couple of security cameras in the area. We had security cameras everywhere. I told him I didn't see a book, I saw a person. Of course, he still didn't believe me. He watched the tape and said, "Oh, it's probably just a book." I told him I wanted to get that door chained shut and maybe put a sign on it that said, "Do not open." He agreed, but not before making fun of me. I reviewed the tape, and sure enough, I saw the door open on its own and a figure crawl backward into the dark. I reported this immediately to my supervisor. "Don't go down there," I said. Her eyes were wide with fear. She shook her head again and broke free from my grasp. She ran down the hallway and disappeared into the darkness. When I first started working there, I was told in no uncertain terms that under no circumstances should anyone be down there. I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, she was gone. I checked the feed from the main hall camera and saw that she had walked straight into the wall. Then she vanished. She looked at me and said, "What are you doing here?" I screamed for help, but no one could hear me. I pounded on the wall until my hands bled. I was trapped. I spun around and saw the girl from the security tape standing there. She smiled at me and beckoned with her finger for me to follow her. I hesitated, but then I followed her anyway. There was no title, and there were no words. There were only pictures. The pictures were disturbing, to say the least. They depicted strange rituals and some sort of cult. They searched the building and outside, but didn't find anyone. I reached out for her, but my hand went right through her. She cried out, and then she was gone. Ran as fast as I could until I reached the front doors. I burst through them and stumbled outside, soaked in sweat, and my heart was pounding. He hadn't believed me before, but after he saw the torn-up basement door, he finally believed me. On the security tape, I watched as she opened the door to the basement and crawled through. The next morning, I went to that door and signed myself in as a staff member who needed to use the basement. As soon as I opened the door, I noticed that the basement stretched on forever in front of me. The door behind me clicked shut and locked. I walked home, got some sleep, and went back to work. The next night, I searched that basement for my book, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I also tried to find the girl, but she was nowhere to be seen. The pages fluttered to the ground, and the girl from the security tape stepped out from behind a pillar. "Run," she whispered. They suggested that maybe she had climbed out a window, but none of them were open. And even if she had, they would have found her. She just disappeared. On the way out, she tried to go back into the service hallway, and I stopped her. Every night she would wander around and try to get into the service hallway in the basement. Every night I would find her and escort her out. This happened for about a week until one night she didn't show up. "You can't go back there," I said. She apologized, and we walked out together. I didn't think much of it after that. I figured that she was just a little weirded out. "How did you get in?" I explained that I worked here. She told me that she had wandered into the library and got lost. I was also told that we weren't allowed to open the basement door from our side, only from the basement side, if that made sense. I looked up to see a girl standing there with a book in her hand. She was clearly a student because she wasn't wearing a name tag. "Can I help you?" I asked. She nodded. I need to use the bathroom. Do you know where the nearest one is?" I pointed her toward the bathroom in the hallway. She thanked me and headed in that direction. That meant no students could go down there, and no staff member was allowed to go down there unless they signed in and out. She mouthed the words "thank you," and then she turned and walked away. Oddly enough, she walked straight into the wall. I figured that she might have been high or something. Students do that sometimes. Instead of going down the hallway, she started walking toward the basement door. I stood up and blocked her path. "Can't go down there," I said. She looked at me with wide eyes and shook her head frantically. She tried to speak, but nothing came out, so I didn't think much of it. So technically, I was a library security guard. My job was mostly to sit at the front desk and make sure no one stole any books. I recognized her from before. "Can I help you?" I asked. She looked scared. Yeah, I need to use the bathroom again. Which way did I go?" I pointed her in the right direction. She thanked me and headed down the hallway. I did that 7 days a week, but only at night. During the day, there were actual librarians that supervised us. But when night shift rolled around, I was on my own.
Ow.
3 of the library buildings had something in common. They all had basements. Now, the main library had 2 entrances. There was the front entrance, which was right inside the lobby, and another entrance, which was in a little alcove on the opposite end of the building. This second entrance was basically a service hallway. Students couldn't get into this hallway because there was a door that was locked from our side. Then one night I heard some shuffling coming from the other side of the door to the basement. I assumed it was just the wind or something, but then I heard a voice. "You finally came back." I jumped. I had no idea how long I'd been standing there listening. I must have been so zoned out that I didn't hear anything else. All I heard was the voice saying, "You finally came back." And the key was kept at the front desk. This meant that the only people who could enter the service hallway were staff members. There was another door at the end of the service hallway. My first few weeks went by without incident. Obviously, I didn't stick around to find out who was on the other side of the door. Of course, he thought I was joking. He laughed at me and said it was probably just a book. A few nights later, I was sitting at the front desk reading a book when I heard footsteps coming down the service hallway. Then I noticed that she had stopped and was looking back at me. About an hour later, the same girl showed up at the front desk. Again, she stopped, looked back at me, mouthed "thank you," and walked into the wall. She walked past me and tried to open the door. I grabbed her arm and stopped her, went and checked on her. It turns out she was fine. She was sitting in the bathroom crying. I asked her if everything was okay. After that, I escorted her to the front doors. However, every night after that, she would come into the library and get lost. One night, while I was watching the security feed, I saw a familiar-looking girl walk through the front doors. I called in the campus police to check it out, and that's when I decided to check the basement footage. When I turned around, I saw that the wall stretched from corner to corner, and there was no door anywhere. Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck. We walked down a hallway and then she stopped and turned around. She looked at me with pleading eyes. "Let me," she whispered. When I turned back to the hallway, I saw a single book lying on the floor. I picked it up and stared at it. As I was looking through the book, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I jumped and dropped the book. I don't remember what happened after that. All I remember is running. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I calmed down.
House.
And that's when my boss showed up.
Ow.